Good. Well, welcome to this episode of InfoSec Real. We are delighted today to be joined by Greg van der Gaast. Greg, you're someone who is a huge personality in the industry. You've got a lot of experience in security as well. We're excited to kind of peel back a few layers here, pick you apart, find out what makes you tick within the industry. Also, we've got lots to cover in respect of current affairs and all kind of good stuff. But before we do, Greg, let me just throw it over to you. Tell us who you are and what you're all about.
I'm Greg van der Gaast. I'm glad you're delighted now. I don't know how it's going to be by the end of this, but I'm Greg van der Gaast. I'm currently kind of a freelance consultant. My last job was the head of information security for the University of Salford. Started out teenage hacker, self-taught about 23 years ago. And I think my position in the industry right now is, if anything that differentiates me, it's looking more at kind of just humanizing the stuff, focusing more on relationships, on curiosity, on human potential, and instead of move away from the box ticking and approach the whole thing as a more kind of a flexible, organic thing, I guess, which makes me a bit of an oddball in this industry.
Yeah, definitely. Where did it start then? The hacking when you were growing up then? What did that kind of look like? What kind of stuff were you teaching yourself?
Well, it started when my slightly older sister, she's 3 years older than me, came home from Blockbuster with the movie Hackers. I was 15 years old and Angelina Jolie was in it. Need I say more? So next thing I knew, I'm Yahooing this hacking stuff. And that's what because Google didn't exist yet. I'm older than I look, but not older than I feel. And I just remember kind of, Googling this stuff. I didn't actually have a computer at the time. I had to go to my father's and he had a computer and I started using that. And that's when I kind of discovered, the internet a bit, how it worked. Usenet was still big back then, which most people won't even know what that is now. Things like Linux and all these other operating systems that I'd never heard of. And it started by, just downloading some distros, playing around, reading, Linux Unleashed, and then the Microsoft books, and then getting on the internet relay chat and finding some hacking channels and just kind of mingling in there, and just being curious and wanting to know how everything worked. So you start learning Unix, but then you've got all these services. Well, how does Apache work? How does a web server work? How does DNS work? How does bind work? How does sendmail work? All these protocols are dead now, but at the time, and it was like, how does Perl work? How does the command line work? And you just start figuring out how all these things work. Just natural curiosity and how these things fit together. And then I got kind of quite into networking, because I remember at the time, no one in security really focused on networks. Everyone focused on systems. And I was like, well, these things all tie together somehow. Like I want to know how routing works. I want to know how, ports and traffic analysis and all these stuff. And just couple of old computers on a desk, a wooden board with 4 legs, running, Snort and all the random tools, and just causing havoc on the internet, basically. And then one day I broke into some computer on the internet, didn't quite know what it was, and it turned out to be a nuclear weapons lab.
Holy shit.
And I didn't actually, it's funny because it made the news. It was in Wired magazine, it was on CNN. There's a video of me, like a reporter on CNN on IRC talking to me. And it made the United Nations Security Council, the US National Security Advisor, who was talking about like the threat of teenage hackers to national security, all this stuff. I'm just some 16-year-old kid in my bedroom. What's going on? And it was such a big deal, but I didn't actually know what I had broken into. It was just a shell account, or I was just trying to score a shell account, and I found this server that had an old version of SendMail, and I managed to trick it into like basically email a password or a kind of a user password pair into its own password file. And then I created an account for myself. It wasn't later that I punched in the actual IP address into Netscape and the picture loaded. And there you go, Atomic Research Center, enriching plutonium and doing nuclear bombs. And this was literally a few weeks after that exact same center had set off 5 live bombs underground. So it was really hot in the media. So some gentleman came to my house not too long after that, and made me a job offer I couldn't refuse. They were really adamant about the couldn't refuse part. And
so you weren't in trouble for it, is that right? Or you were, like, with the authorities?
So I was actually in the Netherlands. I was born in the Netherlands. I grew up in Canada, but for a couple of years I went back to live with my father there. And it was in that period, and what I broke into wasn't in the Netherlands, and it wasn't in the US. And I later went to the US, and that's when the gentleman in suits came. So I hadn't technically broken any of their laws, but they felt I may have had some skills that they could leverage. And then I spent 3 years doing stuff.
Yes.
With a letter in my back pocket authorizing extra legal activities. And that was it. That's that. Imagine showing that to a police officer. Attorney General says I can. So yeah, and did that for a few years. After 9/11, things were getting a little bit hairy in terms of the demands, and then I kind of went more into, like, went to work for consultancy, and then contracting consulting on my own, and then kind of got some kind of low-level InfoSec manager roles, and just kind of grew from there.
That's really interesting. We've had a few people on that have very similar. One, the movie Hackers seems to be the catalyst for everyone going into information security.
I've never seen it. I've never seen it.
Have you never seen it?
As ridiculous as it is, it's actually one of the more accurate hacking movies out there, especially for the time. If you read Bruce Sterling's Hacker Crackdown, which is a free download, it's the story of really the hacking scene in the early 90s. And a lot of the characters from the movie Hackers are actually real names from real people that were around the scene around that time. So it's quite cool to actually see, you know, you're growing up, you're 15, 16 years old, you're reading about this story about these hackers that came like 5, 6, 7 years before you. And then you go and watch a movie and you see all the names and the characters, obviously in really exaggerated ways, but it was still quite cool and accurate.
I think it's crazy how one cult classic sparks off what you could almost say is the industry.
Yeah,
it kind of sparks that, you know, it sparks people to go into the industry and create the industry. I think it's hilarious that that bit of information that you've just shared isn't very well. It is publicized, but not very well publicized. Like, you don't exploit that. Like you could do. You could call yourself the teenage hacker X, Y, and Z, or that's not something you seem to highlight as a virtue. Are you almost like what that time of your life? How do you feel about it?
It's funny because I remember actually, like, some of the agents at the time being like, "You're going to write a book about this when you're done," but it just feels like very anticlimactic, and I cannot imagine someone actually being interested in that stuff. Outside of our industry anyway. And the other thing is, you know, it was a very long time ago as well. So I don't know. It just feels. I mean, certainly the first few years it was kind of like, well, I don't really want to be saying this because it's still quite fresh, and there may be ongoing investigations, and who knows. And then it was like, I don't know. Life just kind of moved on. You started doing other stuff, maybe in a more professional function. I started using it again, maybe about a couple of years ago. I started putting it in a profile, but it was kind of around the same period that I was growing more into kind of leadership positions, and I'm really dealing with C-level individuals, and people have this habit of saying, of thinking you fit in one narrow silo. And if you go technical, oh, former hacker, then they're going to think, oh, he's, you know, technical geeky guy, not very sociable, this and that. And that's kind of the opposite. Like, it's cool to get people interested and come to your talk or whatever, but it's not what I want to represent business wise, because it's not really what I'm about anymore.
What's funny though is that, well, not funny, it's not funny whatsoever really, but you know, the situation you described there, like a piece of SCADA equipment being connected to the open internet, and you've managed to like get a shell on it. And we see, like, this week in the news that thing in America, the water treatment plant or whatever has been compromised somehow through was it TeamViewer or something? I can't remember what it said in the article now, but yeah, basically connected to the internet, and someone's messing with the salt content of water.
Just don't do that.
Yeah.
This is most information security. Is like, don't do that. Just don't do that. And it's interesting how I advocate a lot about, security has become such this high tech, and gosh, you see these rooms of like, everyone's really proud of their socks, these enormous rooms full of like 8K monitors, 8K curved monitors, that all the latest tech, and so cool that it's backlit like your TV back there, everything is purple and dark and everything. And we're hiring all these people, and they're making tons of money and all this tech and tooling to detect these things. And it's like, well, if the normal salt level is 1 part per million, and sometimes you boost it to 2 parts per million when there's a lot, it's not salt, but it's a salt. It was a sterilizing chemical. And sometimes if the water is very difficult or very, very dirty, you have to boost it to 2 parts per million. Why does the system allow you to ramp it up to 100 parts per million, which is toxic? The system just, when you design it, it shouldn't be capable of that. So it doesn't even matter if it's compromised or not. It's not, limit, check the input, limit the scope of what it can do. And it's that lack of thinking in the really early on the phases that keeps biting us in the ass, because we just do everything wide open. We never really go back and think, hey, could we restrict things or build things more intelligently or in a more integrated manner? And then we focus all the time on detection and response. And it costs a fortune, and it's just exponentially inefficient. And that's kind of my gripe with the security industry. So
yeah, I think the interesting thing from that article was that the plant operator observed this is in the article, observed how the attacker took control of the mouse. And I'm just thinking, what is happening there? So he sat there watching him attack the system. I don't get what's going on in this story. This story is so crazy. It just there's not enough information. There's not enough detail.
I mean, I know it's supposed to be a serious discussion about information security and hazards and people getting into infrastructure systems, but I'm just imagining this battle to the death over the mouse, between two of them, and laughing, because really that's about as seriously as I can take it.
Well, yeah, and you got to think, information security. We all focus on like the big, advanced attacks, 0 days, RCE, super technical attacks, and this was TeamViewer. Yeah. Like, we're back to TeamViewer again. Some of these attacks, and there is very large, very sophisticated, SolarWinds type of instance, but something so simple as RDP or TeamViewer can cause death and chaos.
Even the really sophisticated attacks, I wouldn't say sophisticated. I don't think sophisticated is the right word. They're more complex in scale.
Okay, yeah.
Because I remember someone posting about 1.5 years ago that the repository for SolarWinds updates, the password was SolarWinds123.
Yeah, so, Vinod Sparrow, I think, was the dude who posted that, who found it. He's a good bug bounty hunter. Yeah,
not exactly highly sophisticated, but then they got the code and they added the code. That's the thing. But the actual, like, the breach, and this is the thing. Like, you're right, actually. Like, the whole industry is focusing on 99% of the effort and the work and the research is going into areas that account for like 0.1% of the breaches, and then the stuff that causes 99% of them is like, well, that's not cool, that's not cutting edge, that's not interesting, let's ignore that. It's like, so we keep getting breached all the time. Marriott, Equifax, they're all really basic stuff, and every time it's like highly sophisticated foreign nation attack. It's like 13-year-old in Bulgaria used SQL injection. I mean, it's not it's not, is it?
I know, I got an email from my gym this week saying that they've been subject to a highly sophisticated attack. It's a fucking gym. You know what I mean? They're not going to have like nation state defense capabilities here. Do you know what I mean? It's not highly sophisticated. It's probably a bit of ransomware or something.
Yes.
So
North Korea really wants to know your heart.
Exactly. They want to know when I clocked in and out of the swimming pool. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It is crazy, and it's funny. I follow quite a few red teamers on Twitter, and there was a big thread going about that TeamViewer situation with this water plant, saying like, it's a red teamer, like cardinal sin would be to move someone's mouse, because automatically that's how you know a user's going to report you. If they see their mouse move, they're straight on the phone to service desk, aren't they?
Yeah. It's
Crazy.
basic, but we're still there. Like, I think I don't know what the security industry is doing, to be honest. I mean, it's basically like it's a thing upon itself. It's kind of self-propagating because we're not really resolving any issues. We're not, if you look at the amount of when I used to do public speaking, when there was such a thing, I'd always show this slide that it was, and there were government figures. They were from the U.S. Department of Justice, Homeland Security, and they were showing like the number security spending over the years, and it's going up and up and up and up, and it's going up in absolute terms, but it's also going up in terms of percentage of budgets. So your IT budget, 20 years ago, you spent 0.5% on security. Now we're spending about 12%. So that's gone up about 25-fold. So you're expecting, a commensurate reduction in the amount of incidents and breaches, but no, that's accelerating even faster. So we're spending more and more money. We're spending more and more of our money. We're not even slowing this down. Like, and the answer is like, well, ramp it up some more. It's like that's just not sustainable. And if you look at what's causing these things, and that's when I kind of started scratching my head, because I can remember 12-ish years ago, more than that because I'm old, doing, like in my mid to late 20s, doing contract work and, setting up intrusion detection systems and firewalls. And, they're paying like $1,000 a day back then. And it was cool because, you were making lots of money, you were working with lots of tech. I remember like the network guys like choosing network equipment based on the color of the LEDs, because one of them purple.
Sexy tech.
Yeah,
I love it. I love it. That's why people buy Meraki, because it looks sexy. It's got the Apple. It's the Apple of the networking world.
There you go. It was like the Wall Street of the 80s. And we were setting up all, we got to work with SourceFire and all this really cool up and coming security stuff. And I made an absolute fortune in those years. And in hindsight, like that was actually completely useless, because we didn't actually know what the network was really structured like in terms of business activities. We didn't know what data was stored where and how it would flow. We didn't have the mature processes to actually maintain any of this stuff or keep up with change. None of this stuff was normalized properly. We spent millions on security equipment, and they spent millions on paying us to put it in. And in hindsight, I'm like, nah, there's about 20 other things that you could have done for 1/5 or 1/10 of the cost before that would have been way more effective than all the work we did. But you never did those fundamentals. And now I'm kind of like, I don't want to do that stuff anymore. It's like, it's staggering to me, every time I walk into a business, whether it's a new job or a consulting gig, I spend the first week just trying to understand the business, asking around, okay, go talk to developers, go talk to project managers, go talk to HR, go talk to finance. And anyone outside of IT is always surprised that someone in security wants to talk to them. It's like, well, you're in finance, you manage all the financial data. You're in HR, you mentioned all the PII and all this stuff. Like, oh, no one's ever asked us about this anymore before. And then you start, asking developers, like, how do you actually work? Oh, well, we use this platform, that platform's like, sorry, I just noticed you're using the free version of that platform that has no authentication. Yeah, and you go back and you report this stuff, and no one realized, like, no one ever looked at this stuff. And it's staggering how you walk into organizations and like the heads of information security that have been there for like 5+ years, they can't name you what HR system you use. Well, aren't you curious? Like, what are you trying to protect? Like, well, we've got IIM and we've got RBAC and we've got IDS and we've got this. It's like, yeah, but you don't even understand the business that you're supposed to protect, and you're already buying solutions. Like, what's the point? And if you actually find out more about the business, you find, there's so many, build the systems properly, build them together, build so things reinforce each other. Be aware of what the actual areas of risk are and how systems work together, so that your policies and processes actually reflect that, instead of just ticking a box for the ISO audit. And it's staggering how many organizations come in with a new CISO, a new head of information security, is like, oh, we're going to go ISO, and they put in ISO. And I've worked in places where we're not going for ISO because it's ridiculous. Our maturity is zero, and we've got serious infrastructure and technical debt and cultural issues. Cultural issues that we wouldn't even be able to run the environment at a decent level to protect it. So we're not going to get an ISO certification. It's pointless. And then my successor will come in and he'll put ISO in a year's time. Right? Yeah, but he didn't actually fix any of the underlying issues. So you've got a certification now, but you haven't secured anything. So what's the point of certification? And no one gets breached and say, yeah, but we had ISO. You never hear that, do you?
Do you think the problem with businesses is business leaders understand, and they're not understand, but they're aware of these big, all-encompassing compliance and governance structures? So if you say ISO 27001 to anyone really in a C-suite, they've heard of that before. They know what that is.
Yeah.
But if you said, anything else, any more specific, good one, for example, I was talking to a customer the other day, and I was talking about how I use CIS benchmarks, and they'd never heard of CIS before.
Right.
Never heard of CIS benchmarks because it's not in or cool. I don't know. I don't know why they'd never heard of it before. But do you think is that almost a problem, that if you're a security leader and you go to the board and say, well, I want to implement a cultural shift change, or I want to look at our cyber maturity plan, or I want to look at NIST maturity, they've almost got no idea what you're talking about. So do you think, one, is it the job of the cybersecurity professional to properly communicate what you want to do and why the business needs to do that? Or do you think that the businesses are so hooked up on the big, sexy compliance?
Yeah. Oh, I think, you look at the kind of security industry, all the big vendors, and you look at like the big four, they are marketing machines, and they are marketing, GDPR and ISO and all these compliance things because it sells their services and it sells their products. They know that, making them more secure, that's not necessarily going to sell something. But if you go to a board that says like you are legally required to have this compliance and this magic box will fix it for you, then they'll buy from you. And as security practitioners, part of our job is to fight that. That's a $200 billion a pound industry now. And I've heard this said before, like most security companies are marketing companies with tech departments. They'll spend 10 times more on marketing than they actually do on development. A lot of these really cool looking solutions, there's actually not a whole lot to them, but God, do they spend on marketing and sales. So it's very important to counteract that if you want to actually make things secure, which means you have to be a really good communicator and you have to be really good at becoming trusted. So, well, the term I use, you have to become someone worth listening to. And most security professionals, the reputation is not that of the best communicators. So we've got this enormous challenge that requires tremendous communication skills to really overcome a lot of the incorrect messaging. But generally, we're actually really, really, really bad communicators. I've been doing this like 23 years, and it's only the last few years that I'm really realizing, like, I need to fix this, because if I need to invest the time to communicate and build the relationships, because otherwise it's just impossible for me to do my job. And you hear a lot of CISOs complain, oh, they don't listen to me, I don't have this, I don't have the support, I don't report to the board. It's like, great, you've just identified everything you need to do. Stop moaning about it and go do it. But we don't consider it part of our job, but it absolutely is our job. And which leads me to a whole different topic of what is our job. I mean, security is a very immature sector. We've got some kind of like very well-defined job roles for an analyst or an engineer or an architect, but especially in terms of the leadership and the management roles, no one has a clue. You look at, like, I'm on several kind of CISO groups, and the running joke is like, yeah, I'm just hoping to last like another year before I get found out, because I have no idea. How might there's no standard on what the reporting structure should be like, or what metrics you should use, or what KPIs you should have. And the general rule is, look, if you're doing, it doesn't matter what you're doing, what your approach is, how you're getting there, how aligned or misaligned it is to anyone's standard or best practice. If you are driving any kind of actual improvement to your organization's security, you're doing a better job than 80% of the CISOs out there. And just wing it, because literally no one's written the book. And standardizing this stuff is one of the most dangerous things I think out there. There's a big trend towards standardization to mature the industry. It's like, we don't know what we're doing. We shouldn't be standardizing this yet. Like we need to figure this stuff out. And you see a lot of things like practices that are quite common in other industries where we flat out reject them without considering them. And then we want to mature our approach, but we ignore that of more mature industries. And I think that's one of the things I'm fighting with, because, you know, back to your previous comment, like the standardization is really hurting us. It's taking away our flexibility. It's taking away our ability to think. And I think with security, especially, it's really important that everything fits the business. I mean, we're there to protect the business, to enable the business. And one of the best examples I can give of that is, you know, if I've got a risk that I've somehow calculated, which by the way is impossible, to be, you know, £500,000, and I can get rid of that risk for £50,000. Well, that's a good investment, because I'm going to eliminate £500,000 of risk with £50,000. However, the marketing department can turn that 50K into 2 million, give it to the marketing department. You have to really look at what's right for the business as a whole. And once you start doing that, executives start listening to you, because you stop being a drain on the business and someone's just trying to grab resource. They see, oh, this person actually considers the entirety of the business, gives up resource to help the rest of the business. So when this person is asking for something, there's probably a reason for it. And I think that's how we should be approaching it. And to do that, you really have to get very, very intimate with every aspect of your business. You know, the marketing team, the HR, the culture, the people, everything. And we don't do that. We just have like a standard approach for everything. Oh, build a SOC, do this, do this, do this. It doesn't work. You'll never learn enough about the organization to actually secure it. And you'll never get any traction in that organization's management.
More and more times you record these, communication skills seems to be the biggest asset for any information security specialist. It doesn't matter where in your career you sit. You're early on, seasoned, peppered, whatever you want to call it. If you can't communicate, you're not going to. You won't really progress. Maybe is the right thing to say. You survive. You know, you might stay in the role you're in. One of the topics in your book is talking about building brand and influence. I would say you definitely have a defined brand.
Oh, that's good.
You know, people know who you are. How did you go out to build that, or was that naturally? Did that just happen?
I think it just kind of happened, to be honest. First of all, I'm very glad to hear that you're seeing that trend, that communication is, you know, the soft skills are picking up. People are starting to realize that. It's early days. And you're absolutely right. Like I had one kid, 18 he wanted to be mentored, and he's like, what should I be doing? And you know, he's thinking like, what certification do I get? What do I do? This, that. I'm like, go on LinkedIn and start building your brand. Start getting seen, start contributing, start becoming someone people trust. Because I don't know if we want to get into it here or not, but the InfoSec hiring is disastrous. I mean, quite frankly,
let's go into it.
Let's get into it.
Most hiring managers don't have a fucking clue what they're looking for. Everyone wants a unicorn, but this is the irony, I think, is they want, you know, we want the unicorn that has worked with every single one of our 27 different platforms. It's like, that's not the unicorn. The unicorn is the one who's motivated and has the ability to adapt to anything, so they can pick up your 27 platforms and the next 400. And whatever they happen to come across while they're exploring and getting to know your organization, they pick up and understand. That's the unicorn. Like the actual static skills are irrelevant. Any platform, you can grab a book in a week, have a decent understanding of it. So that's totally wrong. So, and I think the way we structure roles is wrong in order to be effective. You know, I build a team, and I don't know what positions to give them, because I've come into an organization. I was like, well, okay, I've got 97 things I need to deal with. And oh, this person looks promising. Which things do you know? Right, I'm going to put you to work on these 17 of my 97 things that I need to work with. It's like that. No one has created a name for this particular role, but hey, this person happens to be good with these tools, and they're quite savvy, and they're good communicators. So I'm going to have them do these things, and just fit. That may not scale necessarily, but those people will grow and adapt when it's easier than you think to make it scale. So that to me is what's important. However, that's not how it works in terms of hiring and job postings and job specs. So, I mean, yeah, what I would tell anyone is build a reputation. And this is not difficult. Like if you're genuinely inquisitive and you care and you want to help people and solve problems, just do that. Just do it in the open, and people will start flocking to you, and that will get you recognized. And it's going to be, you may not fit in any of the boxes that any of the hiring managers and HR and recruiters have defined for what InfoSec roles are, but people are going to know what you're good at. And one day someone like me is going to be like, I need someone who's good at this. There's one, and grab you. And no HR, no recruiter. I'll beat them with a stick to run you through the process, but that's it. And that's how you get hired. And I think that's a much better organic way of doing it. How many times do we get contacted by recruiters? We know how hard it is to find good candidates. A LinkedIn post and about 2 hours of filtering my messages. It's not that hard. You'll get 10 candidates easy for any kind of entry mid-level position, if you're not ridiculously picky about the criteria and just trust in people and your own ability to develop people. That's another thing. So yeah, so I do think that brand building is really, really important. I have no idea what my actual brand is, actually. But I started out, I mean, again, I've been doing this for 23 years. I think I've had my current LinkedIn account for 15-ish years. Up until about two and a half years ago, I didn't really use it. Like in 14, 15 years, I had the average, 500-600 connections, just the odd few people a year here and there that you met, and I'd use it to like look up people, who they are, but I never really posted any content. And it wasn't until I moved to the UK that I kind of started, honestly, because I was struggling for work so bad, and I'd had so many disappointments. I'd love to say that it was some very proactive kind of like, yes, I'm gonna do this. It was basically out of despair, when I was like, I'm gonna die in a ditch now because nobody wants me. So I may as well kind of leave behind all this stuff that I've accumulated. And you write an article, you write a post, 3 people watch it, and then you do another one a couple of days later, 5 people, and then you do another one 3 days later, and 12 people, and 1 even put a like on it. And it just kind of, you just keep going. And before you know it, every time you post something, 10,000 people, I had one post go over 500,000. And it's fantastic. And it just grows, and people start reaching out, and you connect, and people like you reach out, and we'll do this, and I'll get another 10 connections. It just snowballs. It's really important to do that. I've not set out to create any kind of brand in mind. I've always been a kind of a serial entrepreneur. You know what that means? One failed business after the other. And so I've always tried to make, like a cool company name, a cool logo, and then build the company brand, And I realized I need to stop doing the company brand and just do my own personal brand. For the first time in my life, having this ridiculous, unpronounceable last name is useful because it's recognizable. But yeah, I would advise people focus on your personal brand, because that I was doing some mentoring. It was not security wise, it was business wise, and I was actually advising this girl, like, stop focusing on your company and focus on yourself. You become the authority in this area that then happens to have a company that caters to what you care about. That way, in 5 years' time, you can sell your company, or you can start a new company, and your entire following will follow you to your new company, because your following is tied to you and not your company brand. So it's very important for you know, if Jeff Bezos next month starts a new company, you're going to follow it because it's from Jeff Bezos. You know, it's not because, oh, I've never heard of Kuku's whatever company he starts, but Jeff Bezos is behind it, so you follow it because you follow him personally.
I think it's that credibility, isn't it? You know, if you've got credibility in an industry, people buy into that following and will be naturally interested in other things that you do. It's interesting on LinkedIn because I'm not personally, I'm not a massive LinkedIn player. I like Twitter because I like the playground there. But when I go to LinkedIn and kind of look at posts, I see so much vendor shit that I get so bored with it. But I almost feel like, I mean, what you're saying, to be honest, Greg, I feel is golden. And I feel like there's a massive opportunity for people to really accelerate their growth and development if they just play the LinkedIn game a little bit. And, you know, and I say this because I see there's one or two voices out there. I won't say who they are, it's unfair to them, but that I personally, in my, you know, judging them a little bit, I think to myself, who the fuck are they? Like they're nobody in the industry, but because they can string a post together and, you know, they're quite maybe opinionated or what have you, or, you know, they just got a voice, people follow that and people buy into it. And, you know, these are thousands of likes on these posts, shares, comments, all the rest of it. And you think they've built this, not a brand, but they've got this persona that they've developed that people, they kind of trust it.
It's influence.
More like
influence.
Yeah. Cyber influencer is the new hot thing. Being a cyber influencer is the new hot. As I try to be one, failing at the moment. But yeah, you are right, Colin. There's there's a big trend of cyber influence going on. I think one of the issues that I've seen is it's very easy to become an influential person in cyber just by posting. You know, it could be absolute nonsense, but if you keep posting and and it just gets into the algorithm, and LinkedIn starts, you know, tracking it, and the more and more likes and shares, and then LinkedIn loves that stuff and it pushes it to the top of the sea, and then everyone sees it. But yeah, I do agree with you.
You want to get big on LinkedIn, post cat videos. I mean, it'll work. You're right. I mean, you're both right. It's a bit almost, you know, it's like the Kardashians on Instagram or wherever they live. Yeah, there is a lot of garbage out there, and and I struggle with that because, like, if I do a post, I want it to be, you know, constructive or interested or at least funny or something. Those are not. It's when the posts I do, like if I do a video and I think, you know what, this is actually because I've just been mentoring someone or someone just gave me some feedback on something, say, actually, oh, this is really, really good. You should share this. And I'll put a lot of thought into it, guys. This is how I structured this after having thought about it for 20 years. And oh, hey, you know, something just happened. I had a problem at work, and I worked out, like, this is a way we can deal with this, and this is maybe something you can use. You know, genuine value. I feel like, hey, this will really help people. Those are often the posts that have the least traction. You know, but if it's like, hey, let's moan about HR, yes, 10,000 likes, you know.
I said this to a vendor the other day, because of something that we're working on. I'm working on at the side as well. Is and this is going to be a bit controversial, but because of the industry I'm in, but the boring vendor marketing does not work. Yeah. No one is interested in how advanced your AI is or how great your
dark race. Let's go.
Oh, you said it. We'll have to bleep that out now. No, it wasn't. But no one is really interested in where your CEO grew up and the hardships he had and how he sold multiple companies to Apple and Google and X, Y, and Z. What they're interested in is the raw content, a bit of sensationalism, actually, and entertainment. Really, you know, the entertaining posts, or that is actually what works. Not the come look at our platform and have a demo. That no one's interested in that. So, and it actually did not go down very well. Their marketing team of this vendor wasn't that interested in doing entertainment value or sensationalizing, making it interesting to listen and watch. Because unfortunately, that's not what shareholders want. Shareholders want pure marketing, boots on the ground, hammering it into people's ears about our platform or X, Y, and Z.
It's interesting because I was having a very, very similar discussion yesterday with a guy called James from CISO Alliances, if I can kind of plug him there. So they're basically starting to run events, to use the word loosely. But there's so many of these places that are doing this, and it's like a vendor sponsors something, this and that. They're trying to do it a little bit differently. And they're trying to do some events where there's sponsorship and some where there aren't, and they had the first call I was on with them was with Mike Jones, a friend of mine, and it was really interesting because Mike is just one of those guys who's got a different perspective on things, and it's genuinely interesting. And I was talking to this guy James there, and we ended up talking about Darktrace, because I mean Darktrace has been incredibly successful in marketing how shit they are.
Love it.
They've made themselves. They have literally invented. I don't know if they realize this. If you're listening, Darktrace, pay attention. They have spent millions and millions marketing themselves in such a way that everyone hates them, and it's staggering because I don't know a single CISO who likes their product, but every single time there's a breach, like the one with the water treatment plant, in my CISO group chat, it's like, all right, any bets on how long it takes before Darktrace says they could have prevented this with their AI or this or that? And they harass you constantly, and it's all, it's hyped up with their tech and AI. I was like, I'm on various groups, discussion groups with hundreds of other CISOs, and with the exception of their email checking module, no one has ever POC'd the product and decided to use it. And the few people that went into companies where they used it took it out. But whether it works or not is not even relevant. It's the way they market it. It's so aggressive. Now, I think I'd been contacted by about 12 different sales reps. Every time I went to a conference or a show or whatever, it was a different sales rep. And they're all hounding me. And at some point, and this may not have been Darktrace, but there was one vendor, actually a reseller, I think. They would call me and I'm like, I'm not interested. And then they would call one of my guys, and like I in the office, I insisted everyone sit close together so we can always interact. His phone rings 10 minutes later, and it's them. And he's like, I literally just heard you like talking to my boss 10 minutes ago, and he said no. And then they try with other people, and then they try with like the personal assistants of somebody else, saying they have a meeting with me, but I'm not there. Can you pass the phone? Like anything to get me on the phone, and it's ridiculous. Like I got to the point where I asked them, like, put me on a do not call list in your CRM. Put me on a do not call list, and they still kept calling, and I got quite crossed, and I had them put me on it. And then a couple of months ago, I was on, probably 3 months ago now, I was on a round table, and I was one of the 4 guests, and one of the guests was this lady from Darktrace. So obviously Darktrace called every participant and even all the speakers at this round table, and my phone rings, and it's Darktrace. And the guy immediately starts apologizing that he sees that my name's on this do not call list in the CRM system, and he apologizes for that I've been harassed by them in the past, blah, blah, blah. And then he pitches me. And I'm like, this is why I'm on the do not call list. Why are you calling?
It's hilarious.
Do
you know, I find it at the moment. I have, again, I won't name them, but there's a vendor who my company does business with, but they're looking to like, have us maximize our usage of their product. Take some extra stuff from them, services and stuff like that. They're not purchased through you, actually, so don't worry. It's nothing controversial here. And I like their product, right? But they're harassing me. And it's in the same method as like they email me, they want a meeting, they LinkedIn me, and then they do the same to my colleagues saying, hey, we're trying to get a meeting with Colin. Blah, blah. I'm like, automatically I go into like, there's a pushy salesman here. I want to get rid of him. But I actually want their product, but I don't want that tactic at all in my environment. It really pisses me off.
And this is the problem, right? And this is the problem that I personally have. I work in the vendor VAR space. So immediately I am tagged, I am painted with that brush. And that is the issue with this industry. I struggle to like you, for example, Greg, it was easy to have a conversation with you, X, Y, and Z. There was no, you knew. I don't know if you knew I was coming from a sales pitch area, but you didn't think that. You didn't think. I didn't LinkedIn request you. You didn't deny because you thought I'm trying to pitch product to you, X, Y, and Z.
For vendors sometimes. Like, I mean, sometimes I'll see a vendor, but I'll see them as a person, and that's okay. And they'll send me a request, and I'll accept. But when it's out of the blue and I see it's a vendor, no, not tempted.
Yeah, but this industry has, that is the problem with the cybersecurity vendor industry, and for some reason we can't seem to get away with it. We can't seem to remove that type of sales tactic, and I don't know why. I don't know if it's an American pushy sales tactic that used to work. It's that almost a door knocking, selling Windows type of tactic. It just seems to have migrated over into cybersecurity, and it's stuck and it's here and it won't go away.
Right.
And when I talk to the grads that we have here in the company is it doesn't matter where you work, right? It's almost back to that brand, that branded influence. Is you need to be the individual. Build yourself as a respectable, trustworthy individual within the vendor space, and that will carry weight everywhere you go, because you'll have your connections. You'll be able to speak to them and be able to highlight that. Great, they know that you're not a pushy salesperson, that you have great conversations, great connections, and you're there to actually truly help someone rather than just sell product. That's what I'm about. I'm about truly helping individuals or organizations. And if it means not spending any money with the company, it means not spending any money with the company, because you've gained trust with that individual.
Yeah, I agree fully. I mean, I have one vendor that comes to mind. And just because she was great, she was super responsive. I had her on WhatsApp. I could text her at 8 o'clock at night, 8 in the morning, and we would buy mostly professional services from them. But okay, we'll buy 6 days there, 12 days there. But if we also had random questions because our admins didn't have the knowledge or whatever, I could just text her. She'd ask her technical, and they'd have an answer for us. Like they wouldn't mind. Okay, if it's a big engagement, obviously we have to charge the days, but 10 minutes here or there all the time, banter back and forth. It was a good relationship. And I think because of that, she was actually a really, really good salesperson, because I enjoyed working with her as a salesperson. And she once sent me like her sales results for like the team. And I don't remember who the other people's names are, good. But it was like her and like 5 other salespeople, and her sales were like double everybody else combined. And that actually created a lot of animosity in the company, because she's obviously earning way more on commission than anybody else, because the other 5 put together aren't even making half of what she's making in commission. And that created some friction internally, and she ended up leaving. Well, I don't do business with that company anymore. I do business with her new company now. So, I think that should be an incentive for, if you're a good salesperson who builds good trusted relationships, it's not just good for you in terms of, you're going to bring your customers and your commission as well with you, but in terms of the actual company, if you hire good people, good ethical salespeople that build good relationships, that care about, like, you're gonna make more sales. Like, you have to value that. This actually brings me back to one of the more important points, or interesting points from yesterday's conversation I was talking about, is that resellers are always trying to give us presentations on their product, which makes sense. Every time you have them there, it's for them to show you their product. But what if instead of doing that, you just did good things instead? You just sponsor a session with Mike Jones. Give these people some money so they can put Mike Jones up, and give Mike Jones a little bit of money, because it's interesting to us. It doesn't have anything to do with your product, but it's interesting to us. It actually brings value to our lives. That makes me want to do business with your company. It's like going to a free museum, enjoying it, and then on the way out, I'm going to buy something at the gift shop. I don't need any of the overpriced tat in the gift shop, but you've done something for me in the community, and I want to give back to you. So I want to spend some money in your gift shop to keep this going. In the same way that if you do good things for the community, even if they're completely unrelated to your product or your service, The second I need that product or service, I can choose between 5 different vendors, but I'm going to go to you because you did something positive for the community. So start investing instead of just on the products and telling us about your products, which to be honest, most of them are not that differentiated, and just be a better company that we want to do business with. And we'll come to you when we have that need. And I think that's an approach that more people should do. I mean, I don't know how most people think, but I think that relationship and that how things fit together and the yin and yang of it, I think that's important.
I agree. It's very well. Hopefully, that's going to, be what we see going forward is the future. And if any of those companies are listening, we'll definitely accept sponsorship for this show as well.
if Darktrace is listening, I would expect.
Thanks for watching part 1 with Greg. He's a really interesting guy with some really fascinating insights into the InfoSec industry. I love how he's turned himself from a bedroom hacker into a real influencer within the industry. But Greg's got a very unique story, so join us in part 2 for what happened next in his career.